In fact, I guess to summarize what they are saying in opposition, you said sole sourcing was a way through which the MPP was fleeting the people of Ghana. Uh, why should we allow you to use the same process now? So basically, that is what they are saying. What's your defense?
Now, that is a fair question to ask. And it is a fair conversation to be had. But it needs to be had with an open mind. Sole sourcing, we have always known, and we knew this in opposition. It's part of our legal framework for procuring contracts. There's nothing illegal about it. However, there's a potential of it being misused and abused, in which case it can lead to fleecing the public purse. And so in the past, one of the abuses we stated was that instead of it being an exception, it became the norm. Instead of it being an exception to procuring contracts, it became a norm. And as a result of it becoming a norm, the potential of abuse was obviously higher. And the example is clear that there is no road contract that we inherited at the ministry that I can think of that was procured through any other means other than a sole source, other than sole sourcing.
None.
None.
All of them were
None.
sole sourced.
Absolutely. So the conversation then, if it is going to be compared to now, should be done on the basis that the same thing is happening. Otherwise, there is no issue. And so the question one can ask is it the same thing that is being done? And the answer to it is no. They may be similar because, yes, that legal use of sole sourcing to procure contracts is still being used. But is it the norm? It is not. Is it widespread? It's not. So where is the scandal? One major reason for using other methods other than sole sourcing for procuring contracts is to ensure that price is reasonable. Is to ensure that you get best value for good money. Best value for good money. That's one of the main reasons why other means of contracting is preferred to sole sourcing. Sarah, in this whole conversation, has the fourth estate or the minority pointed to any contract, about 40% of all the contracts that have been sole sourced, have they pointed to any of those sole source contracts, which could have been procured for less than we have procured it? I haven't seen any, I haven't heard any. If the purpose of using, say, competitive bidding is to guarantee a good price, then they should be telling us that because we didn't use competitive bidding to procure some, not all of these contracts, some of these contracts led to inflation of price. No one is talking about that. So there's no issue about waste of public funds yet, because they haven't pointed to it. And so what is this conversation about? Is it just to equalize that you spoke of sole sourcing being bad, and so it is bad? The context must make sense. Now, a few inaccuracies. The publication suggests that in 7 months, about 81 contracts were sole sourced at a cost of about 70 billion. So no, that's not true. The facts don't support that. So why do you start this conversation on false premises? What do you want to achieve? Because the facts are known that 23 out of these 81 contracts were inherited from the previous government. They were simply novated with their big push agenda, like migrated onto the big push. Because when they were awarded, they didn't have any dedicated fund to support its execution. So we decided, because of the critical nature of these 23 projects, to put them on the big push agenda. So we did not have to procure them afresh. And these contracts amount to about 14 to 15 billion. So just take 15 billion out of 73 billion, and you see the falsity of the publication. Why did they inflate it when they knew the facts? Because we gave them the information.
To that, before you move on, so that okay, I'm trying very hard. I don't know whether you will continue so that I can come up with some of the things that they've been talking about in response to you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to finish on this note, then you can come in. Now, secondly, the other contracts, apart from the 23 that we inherited, speaking of 81, so apart from the 23 that we inherited, the other contracts, even in their own publication, they have acknowledged that some of them were procured through selective tendering and not sole source. So why do you lump all of them together as sole source contracts? What do you want to achieve? Misinformation? Do you want to inform the public, or you want to have a very honest, fair public conversation? Because apart from the 23, you acknowledge that some of the rest were also selectively tendered. So what do you want to achieve? And the claim that, they, out of their own investigation, is exposing this is another, for want of a better word, let me just use misleading indication. Because these contracts, name of contractor, date the contract was procured, method used to procure it, the cost of the contract, are all on our website for public consumption. We have nothing to hide. And every legal process and financial process required to safeguard the public purse and to guarantee good value for money was done.
On the matter of the contracts, in fact, in response to your colleague at Go Board, Sami Jemfi, who wrote an article in response to what was published yesterday, this is what Suleiman Abrahima posted. You say some of the contracts we counted were awarded by the previous government, and that the Fourth Estate mischievously added all these projects to their list. Well, every contract we counted and added to our list was signed after June 2025 by Governs Kwame Agboja. Was the MPP in power after January 7, 2025, or did the MPP have roads minister called Agboja, or even in opposition, MPP still has been signing road contracts? They're suggesting that all the 81 that they are talking about were signed by the minister.
So you see, Senna, that is the other mischievous, angle that I still can't understand what the purpose is. I've explained to you that these contracts were already awarded before we came into office. But because it did not have a dedicated source of funding, we decided to novate these contracts onto the big push agenda. And we all know that the big push agenda is the vision of His Excellency President John Mahama. And a dedicated fund has been made available for the payment of contracts executed under the big push. And so what Kwame Agboja did was to sign a contract transferring these contracts onto the big push agenda. When the contracts were awarded by the previous government, they were awarded on the ministry's budget and not a big push agenda budget.
Oh, okay.
It was awarded on the ministry's budget, not the big push agenda budget. The big push agenda budget is separate. It is the reason why President Mahama calls for a bill to be brought to Parliament to dedicate, mineral royalties and oil funds to the big push agenda. It's a separate budget on its own. So you cannot pay works if, those works are not on the big push agenda contract. So, and I don't expect Sule Brema and his colleagues at the Fourth Estate to misunderstand this, except for mischievous purposes. Unless they wanted us to abandon the contracts, sack the contractors who were on those projects, and advertise those projects again. I mean, Senna, what sense does it make? You have a contractor on a road. He's done about 40 to 50% of the job. The government of Ghana that gave him the contract hasn't paid him. You want to finish the project because you think it is critical as a government. And you have dedicated funds now to finish it. What sense does it make to abandon the contractor who has done the work to about 50% and hasn't been paid, and open that same contract up for competition? What will you be seeking to achieve? When we know that our constitution, under the principles of state policy, expects government to continue with projects inherited from previous governments. Why will you want to terminate, ask the contractors to go even though you owe them, and open the job that they are already on for competition? When the reason why they abandoned the project at 50% completion is because you didn't pay them in the first place. So the smart thing this government did, the prudential thing that this government did, was to assess the areas, assess the costs to complete, and decide to begin to pay the arrears. That is why you will see that all these contractors have come back to site because they were paid arrears, which they are now reinvesting on the same project. So now, if we had abandoned them and opened the contracts up, the projects up for competitive bidding, we would have still paid them the arrears and they would have been sitting home with the arrears. Because the work they are doing now haven't been paid for by the big push budget yet. So the new contractor would have now been waiting for money to go and start to complete the 50% of the job left, assuming that it was at 50% completion. So are you getting the point I'm making?
Yes.
What sense does it make?
So,
what prudential, reasoning?
So the clarification is what they count as new contracts signed by the minister is actually old contracts that had to be properly transferred formally. Under
Absolutely,
big
and
push.
because it's a legal process, you had to follow the legal process of transferring it onto the big push agenda budget. Because the finance minister would not have paid for the works if they were not on the big push agenda budget.
Then on the matter of value for money, he posed this 17 hours ago. He says, is this the value for money? Let's start with just a very small one, awarded under even restricted tender, and upgrading of Apegusu Mpakadan Feeder Road, signed on November 25, 2025. This contract is for surface dressing, or as we call it, SAPITI. Road length 9 kilometers. Contract sum is 146,511,649 Ghana cedis. Cost per kilometer 16.27 million, $1.47 million. Contractor Build Managers Limited. What is even mind blowing is how they arrived at the contract sum. He also then even goes back to another one. Is a whopping 37.5 million is allocated as maintenance of Department of Feeder Roads headquarters. Maintenance, not construction of a new office. And guess what? This is not the only contract with allocation for maintenance of the same office. And says, stay tuned. So I guess I don't know whether you have that contract offhand. He's saying that the amount you have allocated for cost per kilometer alone is mind-blowing. He says it's only surface dressing. Why are you awarding so much to that contract? So they are asking questions of value for money in itself, even under restricted tendering.
So you see, I don't have that specific contract offhand. But what is obvious is that we have a standard of determining cost per kilometer in this country by the various road agencies. And we inherited that standard, and the cost per kilometer hasn't changed. The cost per kilometer hasn't changed. You look at the topography, the terrain, and other, considerations to determine the cost per kilometer. I would be interested in a conversation. And he says, stay tuned. So we are waiting, but he must do so with honesty and with the aim of safeguarding public purse, because that is what we are guided by. What we have done, and I have every confidence in what we have done, is that whereas in the past, many of the contracts were yellow book contracts, where contractors themselves did their own engineering and came with their own price, which the ministry then agreed and awarded to them. We now went ahead this time around to use our engineers at the various agencies to do the assessment of the projects and the costing of the projects. And the experts say that by that alone, we saved about 5% on each of these projects. If the contractors were those going to do the engineering and the assessment and propose a cost, many of these contracts would have been procured 5% higher than they currently have been procured. That's what the experts say. So we are ready to have that conversation. Cost per kilometer hasn't changed, given all other things held equal.
Cost per kilometer hasn't changed.
Exactly.
I see. Let me conclude on this note, because I think they keep going back to the same thing, that it is what you said that they are using. I wonder why sole source at all, knowing the kind of name that sole source has gained. Because if you look at our campaigns 2016 to 2024, there's been a certain demonizing of sole sourcing of contracts, to the point that everybody believes that once is sole sourced, there must be something wrong. Why sole source at all? Why did the ministry decide to